Welcome to Insider Career Conversations, the podcast that dives deep into the world of unconventional professions. I'm your host, Sylvia Juarez. I'm here to guide you through the maze of unique career paths that often go unnoticed. Each season, we explore a different realm of career possibilities. This season, it's AI. With AI rapidly reshaping industries and becoming a central topic of global discourse, it's clear that it's not just the future, it's the present. So whether you're an AI enthusiast, a curious listener, or someone pondering a career pivot, enjoy today's episode. Hi, welcome to Insider Career Conversations. This podcast highlights careers and paths that align to students' unique interests and personal traits. I'm Sylvia Juarez, an education consultant and first-generation advocate. In this podcast, I explore non-traditional paths to careers and professions. In Season 5, we will learn about artificial intelligence, or AI. This season's co-host, Tyler Moulton, shares their expertise in everything AI. We cover how higher education can support this interest and how students can learn more about this emerging field. Tyler, thanks for your eagerness to share your insight. What are you looking forward in this season?
Yeah, hi, Sylvia. Thank you so much for having me here. I think the biggest thing that I'm excited to explore across the season is conversations around how AI is really permeating every field, industry, area of study as it currently exists. AI, not just like the buzzwords like ChatGPT, DALL-E, but AI just in general is becoming this incredibly pervasive concept that every industry is starting to look to as the next big technology they need to master to stay ahead or even just keep up in a constantly changing world. I think that's what I'm most excited for. And I think that's what I also love most about the AI education work I do. AI can literally appear in every field or it can serve as a toolkit in any area of study. So excited to talk about how pervasive it is with that in mind.
Thank you again, Tyler, for agreeing to be with me this season. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Sylvia. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Tyler Moulton. I am currently head of partnerships and head of publication at the Veritas AI program. Veritas AI is an artificial intelligence program for high school students. You can think of us basically as a research incubator for these students. We work with high schoolers to produce personal AI passion projects. Head of partnerships, we do a lot of work externally. Head of publication, more nerdily, excitingly, I get to work with our kids on sharing their work with the larger academic community. My background is largely as an education nerd turned research nerd turned into AI nerd. I have been a big educator since high school, where I started off with peer tutoring. That transitioned in college into doing more systematic tutoring and teaching in the form of TFing for my university, or TAing, I believe it's called. Working at a Hagwon in Seoul, which is very exciting. Working at a summer camp prevented on summer learning loss. My wonderful mentors in that space are what brought me into research. And taking that one step further, my research mentors are what brought me into the AI space. I think the biggest thing for me about what brought me into AI was that for many years, despite being a very mathematically aligned person, a very data-driven person, I still, as a first-generation college student, thought that AI wasn't for everyone. I thought coding AI was not something necessarily everyone could do. But after just a semester of Python and working with a fantastic mentor in the astronomy space, he made me realize how accessible AI is and how much pretty much anyone with the right foundation and guidance, especially, how much it can be accessed by anyone. I think that's a big trait I carry now into the conversations we'll be having together, Sylvia, but also my work at Veritas AI. I believe AI is really a toolkit that anyone can access with the right guidance and mentorship.
Thank you so much for that. I fell in love with what you do just because of the fact that, in a similar way to myself, helping students understand not only what their options are, but how to really obtain them. Well, I'm going to start with the basics. So I learned that AI, or artificial intelligence, is neural networks that are kind of artificially integrated. Am I on the right track, or am I totally off?
Yeah, I think that you're honing in on one of the biggest buzz topics right now. Neural networks, or what people in the industry will call like neural nets or NNs. So neural networks are this representation of our understanding of neurosymbolic transfer of communication. Basically, neural nets are basically how in AI we understand and think the brain translates communications. Basically, neural nets start with have a series of layers, and they translate information across those layers so that some initial input will by the end be some knowledgeably understood output. That's a lot of how many different AI tools or models or algorithms work. You give some kind of input data. That AI model would have been trained on previous data or it'll have learned itself. And then after you put in that input, it should, by the end, generate some output. And that output might just be simple numbers or predictions, or in cases like ChatGPT, DALL-E, generative AI, it's some whole new world you've just created. So AI really is put in some input, things are happening in the background in the same way things happen in our brains, and some output gets constructed.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate the definition because this stuff is coming around when I'm a little older. So I'm hoping that this particular topic will not only interest students that are at the high school level, community college level. I would even argue for those that are already finishing up maybe their undergrad and trying to feel what's out there for them. And it sounds like there's a lot of different things that this could be applied to. Am I off base?
No, I think you're 100% correct on that front. I think that AI is something that just 10, 15 years ago was a lot more ivory tower in its use. It was a lot more kind of like initial stage where we were seeing it pop up. You only really heard about AI at these top tech firms like Google and Microsoft. But now we're seeing AI being this toolkit that companies big and small are using in order to do their work. I come more from an academic or academia background, I would say, prior to my current work. And I can tell you that in the research spaces, especially science, social science, anything quantitative adjacent, that AI is being used in all areas of academia research. So it's something that I would say in the past 10, 15 years has really blown up. And even just in the past, I would say 3 to 5 years has really become front of mind for a lot of industries, universities, and so on.
Right. So part of the work that I do is taking away some of the misconceptions and how to define different things for students. So can you tell me the difference between artificial intelligence and computer science as a study? Or is it similar or interactive? Someone like myself doesn't necessarily have that depth to be able to not only understand it enough to be able to articulate it, but really genuinely know whether it is interchangeable.
Yeah, of course. Happy to do my best to try and demystify it. One thing I'll say right off the bat is there is a lot of overlap between terms like artificial intelligence and computer science. Also, one, not to throw another wrench into the system, but data science is probably also something that you've heard as another overlapping term here. These three terms, especially that I just mentioned, AI, data science, computer science, I would say the way that we are going to be talking about them a lot usually revolves a lot around computer science being kind of the all-encompassing, or if you're thinking about like a big Venn diagram where there's smaller circles in the middle, computer science is more of the overarching field and AI is more of the subfield. That's not perfectly correct. I want to be super clear. Computer science has nothing to do with neuroscience. AI is built off neuroscientific principles. Right. When we think about the way that AI is more or less like a tech piece, or we'll talk a lot about tech opportunities and tech jobs, I would say you can think about it in that kind of, what do they call that? Circumscribed circles. We can think about this as like a Venn diagram getting smaller. So I would say what's really important to note here is that AI and data science are probably the two terms that have the most overlap. AI and data science are all about using data. They're all about algorithms, especially. They really get into the weeds of statistics and mathematics to interpret and make predictions from data. Whereas computer science is kind of this broader field in which people are using computer engineering to construct software or build computer applications. I would say for me, the big difference between AI, data science, computer science is that computer science is the science of computer engineering and of leveraging computers for all different applications. Data science is more curatedly the science of data. So how do we collect data? How do we process data? How do we work with data, make findings out of data? Artificial intelligence, though, very uniquely, is the attempt to replicate human intelligence in what is typically computers or technology. A lot of what human intelligence is decision-making, problem-solving, trying to make predictions. So you see how there's so much overlap between what AI actually is and what data science and computer science are. I would say at its core, AI is much more focused on how can we replicate the way humans think and do it faster and perhaps even better at some point. Whereas computer science and data science are a lot more just focused on analyzing data or using computer engineering to build apps.
Right. I really appreciate you breaking that down because it does give us an opportunity to have students really think about, or even anybody listening to this really think about the differences and understanding it. Because again, I started off with misconceptions because you're bringing out some very clear points as to each definition and how we really need to think about it and not get so carried away with feeling one way about another thing versus another, because technology is here to stay, right? And I think that's what we want our students to really embrace, right? Feel empowered with the idea that I want to use this new up and coming tool that can be used in so many different ways. The mama in me, I'm going to be honest with you, gets a little nervous because I also like to be able to explain to students what the limitations may be. But if I'm understanding this, there's not a lot of limitations short of the fact that you may not have enough imagination to feed into whatever you're trying to get artificial intelligence from. What is your opinion of that? That sometimes we hear some of the things that AI is doing, maybe not so positive. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting conversation. So I might be wrong about this, but my personal viewpoint right now is that a lot of how AI is limited is in the bounds of human knowledge as it currently exists, and more specifically in the bounds of how we humans understand our own knowledge. Artificial intelligence is really meant to be the replication or reconstruction of human thinking and reasoning and decision making. And so ultimately, I think right now that we're not at a point where AI can overtake humans' ability to think and reason. I mean, one thing that AI does have over us is it can take lots more data than a human can, like a computer. But ultimately, I think the way in which AI currently exists is largely that it's limited by the bounds of human knowledge, the bounds of what humans can even imagine as possible. I think it's also bound by human thinking and limited in that way. For instance, one big thing that is such a pervasive topic in AI right now is AI ethics and AI discrimination. For instance, one thing that I think is really fascinating to think about is that a lot of the biases we see in this world around us, vis-a-vis racism and racial preferencing, that pops up in AI too. Very small example, I was using generative AI the other day, specifically a generative AI model that when you input text, it'll output a picture for you. And I was asking that generative AI, hey, what does a realistic image of a boardroom at a startup in San Francisco look like? And it gave me 4 pictures, actually, each with like 3 to 7 people, where very funnily, it was blurred faces on like normal bodies. But despite the blur, you could see that every person there was white, maybe East Asian or Latino, but white aligned in their skin color. And that just shows you that these biases that we have present in our real world are ultimately being constructed in the AI that we as humans are building and using. So I would say for me, that is kind of the best anecdotal example that AI is limited by we, the people creating that AI.
That's fascinating because a lot of the work I do is around social justice. And sometimes we feel like we have to be in person to do a lot of the advocating that whether we're moving towards immigrants' rights or law enforcement and engagement and all these other things that we're really pushing for representation to be diverse. If I'm hearing you correctly, AI is only taking into consideration what our limitations are in the in-person or the human characteristic. And I really like what you're saying, because I think you're also kind of demystifying some of these topics for us and our audience to understand a little bit better and be more critical about it, because I'm always on my kids about that critical thinking. And I don't think sometimes it translates to you're doing it, you're just maybe not applying it in a way that you consider it as critical thinking. So what do you think when people talk about this being the wild, wild west in terms of AI being so new? Do you feel that it is too vague for those that may not have a concrete sense to go into it?
So from my experience, I would argue that there hasn't been a lot of work until the most recent years to make AI feel accessible. If there's one piece of advice that I got early on in my career that I carry forward as a value at this point, it's that, and this isn't just about AI, it's that we have to make sure that in our language that we use to describe and help build other people towards being able to do something, we should always make things feel accessible. That's not to say that we should make things feel like hard work or challenging, but we should make things feel like something that is accessible, that different people can access. And I think for the longest time, AI has been described as this very inaccessible toolkit that only geniuses can leverage. And in
Right.
reality, from both the perspective of coding heavy and no code, low code AI, both those things are just false. For in high code AI, if you take one semester of Python, there is so much accessible out there in terms of models and work that has already been built in Python and can be easily communicated for people to learn. But that being said, being able to take a semester of Python is itself an access point question. Let's talk instead about no code, low code AI like ChatGPT, like DALL-E. These are technologies where you can learn pretty easily from online resources, things like what we call prompt engineering, or how to come up with the best prompts to put into ChatGPT to get the right outputs. ChatGPT and DALL-E and these technologies help make AI incredibly accessible to people. They're not without their own limitations, but they make it very accessible, and they allow people to use AI in meaningful ways. And so I think the biggest thing in recent years to me has just been increasing democratization of AI that wasn't present before.
Okay. Okay. So this is all fascinating, and I really appreciate you explaining about this really up and coming field, if you will. But let's take a step back. How did AI pique your interest? Because I often talk to students that they don't realize that they have a serious interest in something until I start talking to them. So how in this conversation can you share how you found your interest in this particular topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Sylvia. And I think one thing that would be helpful to share with the audience, because but not everyone watching knows, is that I come here as a representative of Veritas AI and as an AI professional. Veritas AI is an artificial intelligence program for high school students focused on helping students build passion projects, research projects in the AI space. So I'm very much in that role, an AI educator or an education person in the AI space. So while I'm in this call present as an AI nerd above all else, I would say I became an AI nerd because I was first an education nerd, then I was a research nerd, and then that is what turned me into an AI nerd.
I love the timeline. Appreciate you for that.
Yeah, of course. And I would say I've always been interested in education and teaching. I've been doing it as a peer tutor since high school. In college, it translated to 2 of my 3 summers, so to speak, being spent on summer camp teaching, on teaching at a Have One in Seoul, which is a really awesome opportunity. And I would say just being in love with the education space, in love with the mentors I had, is what translated me into trying out research. And that is what really let me get into AI. Because even though I went to a school like Harvard, which is incredibly privileged, I didn't go there as a first generation college student, as a trans scientist, thinking AI was going to be something super accessible for me. I kind of just stumbled into it when, after taking a coding class, similar to what I was saying earlier, after taking a coding class. I started researching with a particular mentor of mine who's also a great educator. And what he taught me in the context of that project is that AI is one of many very accessible data science toolkits that, with the right guidance and education, anyone can learn. And within the period of, I think, 3 months, he was able to help guide me to understand how to use AI toolkits in Python, how to properly apply them in the context of an astrophysics project, how to do that work, vet that work, and translate it to communicable research. And so I really got into this field because I had a fantastic mentor who made it feel accessible to me. And I would say that's a big thing that I sit in and spend a lot of time reflecting on in my work at Veritas. How can I make sure that the students working here feel empowered, and as though this field is one that is accessible to them, even though they are pretty young as high school students in this space?
And I really appreciate you pointing out 2 things. One, you really leaned into the fact that you are, quote unquote, an educator, a teacher, right? And I think, again, sometimes when I say that to a student, that they're, as a young high school student, they may be helping tutor or teach someone a particular topic or support their siblings. And I tell them that they're teaching or teachers, they look a little confused because they don't think of an individual looking in a certain way. And I really appreciate you leaning in on that topic or that example, because we do need to show individuals that there are people doing very different things that are representing a teaching role, an educator role. The other thing is, I really appreciate you also calling out someone supporting you, someone taking the time to do that, because sometimes if you're at an institution like, I would say Harvard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the impression is you're on your own. No one's there to help you. You're isolated, or you don't have anyone who's going to give you that support to really expand your knowledge beyond the classroom. So I really like the fact that you're talking about someone who has really took an interest in you and wanted you to learn about something that was eventually now, because that person really blossomed, a great advocate for what is now the AI space. Can you tell us a little bit about how you decided or thought that the advice you were getting was something that you currently continue to use?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually would love to say one broader point before getting into that question. So one point you made there is that a lot of people will look at a place like Harvard and will expect that people are being incredibly independent or not taking that help. And I think that that is an illusion that a lot of people at institutions like that put up to suggest that because they are genius, brilliant people, they don't need that kind of help. And I think that that is, just to be super candid, a little bit BS or a little bit fake. And I think it's constructed so that those people can hold on to the guise of their privilege and the guise of their brilliance. In reality, mentorship is embedded in the language of power that permeates places like Harvard. Everyone talks about having mentors, even more so than they even think about mentoring, frankly. I think it's so important to note that people in power almost always look to mentorship as a critical way to help themselves advance. And I think that mentorship is something that I've learned is such an equalizer in allowing people to access otherwise difficult places, difficult concepts, anything. So I am so pro mentorship and think that it needs to be less gatekept. I didn't learn about it in public school, so I'm so big on it now. But yeah, getting back to your question, my sense here is that mentorship was really critically important for me and my ability to advance in the AI space. And I'm a really big advocate of people accessing and getting mentors whenever possible. That's a difficult thing, right? Because you have to click with a mentor in order for it to be really beneficial. But I think part of that is just meeting people. One of the other big things I've learned in my career that's so important, and everyone says this, so it's funny it took me so long to learn, is how critical networking is. And networking isn't just meeting peers, it's also meeting the people who become your mentors. It's meeting the people who become your mentees and who, as they grow in their career, will maybe not yet be able to advocate for you, but be able to down the line. I would say for me, networking, finding mentors is all about finding your community as the most kind of critical component of a successful career, at least as far as I'm seeing it so far now.
Right. That's a skill set. And you're pointing out that now you went from an institution that the student body gives out of parents to now you really taking advantage of that mentorship. I really want to make sure to say that that's a skill set that you gained as now you take that into promoting AI to the younger generations and how they can fit in that. And you're closer to the college admissions and preparation world than I am, even though I am a college admissions coach and I help students prepare their writing for how they want to move forward and where they're applying to schools and the careers that they're considering. Would you give us either a bit of advice that you got that you were really grateful that you received as you were applying to college, or maybe one that you wished you would have gotten?
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting point because I never touched AI, I will admit, prior to my sophomore year of college. And so I will try to make this recommendation thinking about who I was and what I would have benefited at the time. I'm thinking about like a young little AI nerd who is looking for more critical advice for their particular interests.
Right.
So I would say two things I have mentioned that I think are so important to me and what I would recommend to any student, so that version of myself who didn't yet know AI, are one, building a network, and two, always advocating for things as accessible, even if they are not yet accessible to you. I think finding your network and finding mentors, mentees, your community to really build a support system for yourself and also like have people you're connected to in your larger career goals is really important for being able to move forward and ahead. I think also advocating for things as accessible to yourself and to others is so critical. I think there are so many students out there who don't apply to the top universities, who won't apply to a CS or AI program because top universities are hard to get into. CS admission rates are some of the lowest across majors right now. And the reality is that in both of these points, networking and advocating for yourself, it's really only by imagining or envisioning like a world that is accessible to you that you can feel and dream and work towards those things. I know this is a bit like lofty in the way I'm capturing it, but I really think kids, especially who are so impressionable, they need support systems vis-a-vis networking, and they need to be given the space to dream and imagine a future ahead of themselves. Part of that comes down to us who are already in mentorship roles or already in these positions to like help them network as much as we can when we interface with them. and to help them remind them constantly, like, things are accessible. I tell students so much in the Veritas AI program, like, I promise you'll be able to get this. AI is accessible. Publishing is accessible. It's hard work, but you can do it if you work through it.
I like that you include hard work, because sometimes we think that technology, or students think that technology or anything related to it, is the easier way out. And that's why I made my point earlier about critical thinking, because sometimes students are trying to find a quick way to do or get to where they want to get, but they don't necessarily think through the skill set that they need to do and what they have to do to get there. It just because the technology is in front of you is fast doesn't mean that you're going to get to your success the way you define it, right? Because that's defined by everyone, but how you get there quickly.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't believe in hard work as a value. Let me be clear, but I do think hard work is critical if one of your goals is to continue advancing yourself in your career and moving upwards. And I do think positioning my advice now more specifically for a young little AI nerd, one of the many kids we get to work with at Veritas, I would say that, again, networking and accessibility are so important, but think about it in a more specific light. So honestly, I think I could apply this advice to any field and feel pretty comfortable in providing it. So networking is so important, especially in a space like AI, because AI is only being used readily and consistently at top industry companies in the hallowed halls, so to speak, of academia. And so only by finding mentors in that space can you really get adjacent to, like, what is the cutting edge of AI. That is not to say don't feel worried if you can't perfectly find a mentor very quickly, but definitely look for mentorship opportunities, networking opportunities. That's the only way that you can stay abreast of what is currently cutting edge in AI. Again, also make sure to make it feel accessible for you, both the AI itself and the networking. Don't be afraid on the networking front to send a million cold emails. That's how you find the right person who could be your mentor or support system. And on the AI front itself, AI is just tinkering and it's just coding. Feel free and emboldened to explore in that coding, try different things out, pursue independent projects if you don't yet have your mentor. So I feel like so much of the college admissions process, especially in this day and age, has become about, yes, being well-rounded, but also having that niche or point, they call it in the admission space, where you have something that you're really good at. If you love AI and love exploring it, spend time building out passion projects, finding mentors to help you take it further, building a network and community around the work that you're doing in terms of extracurricular clubs at your school, things outside of your school, personal passion projects. All I can say is really take these two things, building a network, i.e. building a support system for yourself, and framing things as accessible, if not challenging for yourself. And I think with that, assuming you have the passion in AI to make it all feel exciting and fun, you'll drive forward very successfully.
That's wonderful. Now, we talked about Veritas AI a lot. We've tossed the word around a little bit. I learned about the program. I fell in love with it. Definitely want our audience to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk a little bit about the program and a little bit about what I get to nerd out over while I'm there. But yeah, Veritas AI is an artificial intelligence program for high school students. We're very much a research incubator, a passion project program, and that students will enroll in one of our many programs in order to learn the fundamentals of artificial intelligence coding. And then over the course of that program, they'll cement that foundation and then move on to build out, either in the context of our group classes, a group project, or in our one-on-one program, an independent project leveraging AI in their field of interest. And for me, it's this last piece of applying AI in their field of interest that I love and nerd out over so much with our students. Kids come into our program to, yes, learn AI as this, like, centralized toolkit or data science toolkit, essentially. But ultimately, what they learn is that AI can be applied in pretty much any field, as long as you think about that field as having data or find data. So for instance, we've had kids who have come into our group classes. For instance, one example is our AI plus finance deep dive group class, where students learn about AI in the context of business and financial topics. And those students built together in that group class a stock selection algorithm that helped them ideate what it would mean to identify the highest value stock, I think even cryptocurrencies, and then put that into a portfolio. They were under 18, so I'm pretty sure they couldn't do anything with it yet. But a really cool example of fleshing out AI in a specific passion area. Our fellowship is our biggest one-on-one program, and we see students do a wild, full gamut of exercises there. I've had students use AI for asteroid classification and astronomy. I've seen students use AI for art re-replication, so to speak, where she can input a personal photo and it can be outputted the style of Van Gogh's Starry Night or anything similar. I've seen students use AI for building a business chatbot. There is so much that AI can be used for across every field, even journalism, social media analysis, literature. That is my favorite part of what we get to do with students here. And I love seeing the way our students' projects culminate, manifest, whatever you want to call it.
And I have to tell you that that's all phenomenal because we're talking about creativity. We're talking about expression in different ways that students can pursue. And I love the fact that you're going into different genres, even though it is AI overall. You're going into the business, the art, whatever the different applications are. I think I've heard somewhere that the healthcare field is really using AI in a variety of ways, not only in what would be traditional, but also creating medications and just all of those things that are starting to touch our common lives that I think is really fascinating that you're pointing out to these students in some really fantastic ways. So this past week, I started working with an 8th grader, believe it or not, preparing them for college preparation. So that's more of advising I do. So I want to kind of tap into young Tyler. When you were young, were you that imaginative kid? I know you were a nerd. You've already told us that. So what do you think are traits you're still true to at this point as you're kind of moving forward professionally, just for our younger listeners to start getting a feeling about?
Yeah, I would say that there are definitely some elements of who I was as a young nerd that still permeate today. I would say probably the two things that are kind of the biggest elements of who I was then that still come across now are probably one that I was then and I now still am an educator. We mentioned that a bit. And the second thing is that I've always been an extremely numbers or data driven person. I'm a very logically minded person, which is probably why AI makes a lot of sense for me the way it's currently constructed. The educator piece, I think, is pretty obvious. I just love sharing and co-developing knowledge. I think the way that my view on educating has changed over time and evolved, that I used to see wanting to be a professor or an educator when I was a kid as a way of being an expert at something and getting to share that knowledge with others. I think that was more of a perspective of I wanted to be the holder of knowledge. Now I look more of it as I would like to maybe be a professor one day or continue to be an educator because I learned so much from the people that I am purportedly teaching. It feels more like when I am educating others that I am gaining more from them in terms of different ways to think about or understand the problem being posed. I've seen kids in the Veritas AI program do levels of AI that go well beyond my own knowledge. And so that's what I love about being an educator now. I loved what I get to learn from the people I teach. The second thing that I've always been is very numerical or very data driven. When I was younger, I was more like the robot kid who was just driven by certain numbers. I didn't like English class as much because there was no perfectly correct answer. I've gotten a bit more mature as I've gotten older and I've grown to appreciate that. But definitely in being an AI professional and getting to work with students on AI projects, building their understanding of code, the academic process, research, that's definitely still a big part of who I am. Numbers make sense to me, although I've been a lot more open-minded as I've gotten older of other things making sense too.
I love your answer because I think as a whole, sometimes I come across individuals, maybe not just in education, but elsewhere, where when I talk about working with an 8th grader, they get astonished and they're like, oh my God, what could they know at that point? But there are some young students that already are very clear about the realm. This particular 8th grader I'm working with, he wants to study physics. He knows this now. He's talking about some of the coding he's already done. He wants to talk about. So he's very much like you in terms of data, information, formulas being of interest to him. So I love the fact that you're really highlighting that because there are some students out there that really do need that. So as we wrap up this episode, I have one last question for you because I think the other part of my journey with students is that sometimes we've got to explain to our parents or our family or our friends what we do and what we're interested in. And they kind of look a little incredulous when they're looking at some of the professions that we might be interested in. What does your family or friends think about your field and what you're doing just in general?
So I'll answer two answers here, family and friends. So my family, I'm not going to lie to you, doesn't think much of what I do. And that is not to say they don't love me. They're not very proud of me. My parents didn't go to college. And for them, they raised us with educational values, but no kind of clear-cut definition of what success looks like. My mom's actually the type of person to tell me constantly that I stress too much or do too much. So I think my mom is deeply proud of me, but not because of a specific field I'm in, more so because I care about the world around me and try to integrate that into the work I'm doing. I think this is where there's like bias for the AI or computer science space. I have a lot of friends who are deeply proud of me getting to do work in AI, or I mentioned earlier, I've done research in AI astronomy. I think that I have a lot of people in my life who validate the work that I get to do and think very highly of me in that regard. I think this is actually kind of a dangerous thing, though, because I know there's a lot of pressure that families will put on kids to go into the AI or more broadly the computer science space, because that's where the jobs are. That's like one of those high value like places to be in, etc. And I think what I love, though, about AI is that we can have kids come into the program who use AI for completely non-computer science applications like journalism, like social media analysis. And I think what I love about AI for students is that any kid can probably get away with convincing their parents like, oh, AI is so high value. Like, haven't you told me that I should be a computer scientist? But they can use AI as their unique toolkit to explore something else unrelated. And I am not advocating for kids hiding this from their parents, but it's a different way for students to show their parents, like, I am doing everything that society is pressuring me to do, but I'm doing it because I can apply this toolkit to something I am deeply excited about. So yeah, I don't know if like my family and my friends' perspective on me and what I'm doing is like, in my opinion, the best lesson for students. But I think because we can use AI for education, for applications in random fields, it's something that we can jump off the validation people have for AI and CS, but still leverage it for something we're really excited about.
And I'm excited about what we're going to be talking about in this season's podcast, just because I really am interested. This is something I really am interested in. I have no idea. I was just excited. I remembered neural networks. So thank you so much for being very elementary with me and walking me through that. And hopefully our audience is also getting that. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your enthusiasm about AI. Our audience is really going to learn a lot from you.
Oh, I'm so excited as well. Thank you so much, Sylvia. And I think what I'm even more excited about is just to introduce everyone to the wonderful, wonderful people from my network who are doing AI across such a broad spectrum of applications. I think that we have some really cool people who will help speak to the different ways AI can look in terms of careers and jobs and all that. So I'm just incredibly excited as well for all that and to introduce you to them very soon.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And for everyone else, stay tuned for more insider career conversations that showcase career paths within artificial intelligence. We appreciate you listening and look forward to next time.
This podcast is brought to you by Juarez Consulting. Learn more at juarezconsultinginc.com or follow us on social media or YouTube at Juarez Consulting.